Hey everybody, this is Brett Ingram and this is the optYOUmize podcast, the show that helps entrepreneurs build their dream business and dream life. Today we're talking with Peggy Van De Plassche, former financial services and technology executive and venture capitalist, now turned author and founder of the Microdose diet, a holistic protocol based on the combination of alternative medicine that aims at rewiring the brain, calming the body, mastering the emotions, and raising the energy to reach more success. I'm super excited about this because I'm all about expanding knowledge about what's possible and new ideas for success. So, with that, welcome, Peggy, and thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you so much, Brett. Thank you for the intro. I'm so excited to be here and answer any questions you might have.
I'm excited to have you here too. I was, looking through your background. I'm just fascinated by what you do. So I have a lot of questions that I want to ask, but I do want to start off a little bit just with your background.
Yeah.
How did you get your start in finance and tech, venture capital, that whole high intensity world? And then what led you to switch from that to what you're doing now?
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. I almost forget that part of my life, but to get there was not easy. You're absolutely right. I'm sure you can hear to my accent. I'm from France and I'm living in Canada. I'm in Toronto. So I had to make a lot of trade-off, changing countries, changing city, and study, work hard, the usual that I'm sure your audience gonna relate to, and eventually I was able to make it, but it seems so far away now. And you know what? I love finance. I'm a finance person through and through. I just love, just the balance of it, the music of it. I just love that you can see everything just looking at the numbers. But I also have to admit that my mental health was not amazing working in finance. And I don't want to blame it on finance, and I'm sure the entrepreneurs or the execs who are listening to us today might relate to what I'm going to say. It's me might have a propensity to already have, mental health kind of weaknesses, let's put it that way. And if you put enough pressure on people who might already be on top of that a bit more susceptible, well, it's a big a cooking pressure. So for me, I ended up with quite a bit of challenges in terms of anxiety, very, very high anxiety, very high stress, some also flavor of depression, which to be fair, I was not seeing because I've always been very anxious. So it's difficult to know, are you more anxious when you were anxious since you were a kid? But also everyone around me was like that. So there was not a lot of opportunity to realize there was a problem, and the pandemic was really the bell, because I was out of that environment. I was just like, oh my God, what's going on? And that's when I started to research and discover microdosing psychedelics, and that has been absolutely transformational. So that's my journey, really.
That's amazing. First of all, you're 100% not alone. I know a lot of people from that world, and I know it's high risk, high reward. Like, there's tons of intensity. You can obviously do really well financially. So from the perspectives of what we sometimes deem as success, it's a fast track, right? It's the right place to be. At the same time, the pressure cooker that you're in, it does wear people down. And even strong people, their health suffers sometimes. I know some people that went down those kinds of tracks that continued, and they still do it and whatever. And I know a lot of people that started that way and said, you know what, this isn't what I want. I'm switching gears. I'm changing careers. I know some people that went back into teaching because they felt like that was going to be something that, financially it doesn't even come close to comparing, but at the same time, they're doing something they feel more fulfilled by.
Yeah.
And, a lot of times too, when you're in an environment where it's high performance, but it's also a zero-sum game because you have X number of people that are going to advance and everybody else is going to get shipped out of the company.
Yeah.
You're sort of on a team, but you're also,
Yeah, exactly. But there is something super interesting you're saying with this idea of the environment is high pressure and many people opt out after a while. If I had discovered microdosing psychedelics, and you were talking in the intro, the alternative therapy I'm using in combination with the microdosing 20 years ago, I think my life would have been very different, and I think finance would not have stressed me the way it has stressed me. So, and today it's different. I'm in health and wellness. I'm not going to go back in finance unless I start a fund to invest in this type of companies. But I would be a very different person. And I think I would be able to handle way better the pressure. And somehow I regret that I will never have the opportunity, because I never really liked the idea of opting out, because I couldn't handle the pressure, which is why I always put myself under tons of pressure, because there's like, okay, I don't care, you're doing it, But I think there was another way, a way to put yourself through the same challenges, but how you react to them is highly different. And unfortunately, yes, for some people it's better to opt out, but there is a middle ground. For the people who are listening to us today, there is the opportunity to be in your super competitive job or career and not feel totally anxious and stressed. And that's what I'm interested in now, is how do I bring that to people so they can stay in their lane.
Yeah, and I think that's really powerful. I think, we, for a long time, just as a society, as a people, sort of frowned upon taking breaks, worrying about mental health, those kinds of things. The focus was always on achievement
Yeah,
and things like that. And then as science has evolved and people have evolved, we've started to realize these things are connected. You can only run the engine at full speed for so long, so fast, and eventually it breaks down. You've
yeah,
got to be able to have this. So if you have that ability where you can unplug and recharge your own batteries and have time to sort of recenter yourself in those things, I think it's a really, really powerful way to do it, because it doesn't matter. I mean, whether it's a job or even in our personal lives, there are a lot of stressors in life. I
exactly.
mean, there just are. And if you're going high strung after high strung, you just get to a point where it's hard to handle, and it makes you anxious to a point where you're almost like boom, you're so skittish about everything, because any
Yeah,
noise, you're just on edge all the time. And so
exactly.
I do
Exactly.
think it's super important to do that. But I also like the fact that you mentioned the idea that, hey, if you have that balance, it isn't like you have to give up something that might be high intensity if you really like it. You just need to find a way to balance that so you're not always at full intensity.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think that's really cool. So I want to talk specifically, what is exactly microdosing and
Yeah.
how does it work? I mean, we're going to talk a lot about this kind of stuff, but I want to know exactly what that is, just so we have a good definition to start off with.
Yeah. So microdosing, I would say, like the name say it, it's taking micro dose of a substance. So it doesn't have to be psychedelics. You can microdose anything as long as you're taking a very small dose of an active substance. Of course, in our context, we're talking about psychedelics, and there are couple of psychedelics you can microdose. One is magic mushrooms or psilocybin, which is the active components, which is really what I focus on. The other is LSD. Acid, you probably heard about it through Steve Jobs, who used to drop quite a bit of acid for his own creativity. And so you really, and that's the challenge with psychedelics, is that we put everything in the same bag. And you have multiple type of psychedelics. Maybe you heard about ayahuasca, of course magic mushrooms, ecstasy, which is also called MDMA or Molly or LSD. Anyway, you have obviously ketamine. So you have a whole gamut of psychedelics. So when we say psychedelics, what we mean is psychoactive substance. So a substance that's going to act on your brain, on your thoughts, on on all these exciting things that will help you to rewire your brain and the way you react, and also your body actually. But they are not all created equal. I love magic mushroom because, well, it's natural, obviously, but it's also widely accessible. It's pretty cheap, so I really like that, and no one can really play with it in a lab. So that's something I really like. And there is also the concept of a dosage. So psychedelics, as I said, multiple psychedelics, but you can do microdosing, as we just mentioned, very small dose. When you take a small dose of mushrooms, I take it every other day. There are different regimens. I don't feel anything. It's as if I was taking, I don't know, my omega-3 or, whatever type of supplements you might take in the morning. But as you increase the dosage, of course, you start feeling different effects. And very often people, when they think psychedelics, they're thinking full trip. They're thinking, pink elephants and whatever type of trip, and that is great. I've done it as well with shaman, always from a healing perspective. But very often when people think psychedelics, they're thinking recreational, very high dosage. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, there are so many options. And very often people are not informed enough and they put everything in the same bag.
Yeah, and I mean that's sort of where I am. So I'm curious to learn as we go because so typically is the consumption you eat it? Is that generally the idea?
So you eat it for sure, but the substance can come as dry mushroom. It can come as edible. So I sell actually my own microdosing products. It comes in the form of pills, so it's already pre-dosed. And the value is that you can also add additional adaptogen. So for example, I add lion's mane, which is very good for your brain. So you don't have just the psilocybin, you also have additional things. So you always eat it. It just depends. It might be on different forms. Yeah, some people drink it as a tea as well. I don't really like that. I think it's a bit more difficult to control. How long do
Okay.
how long do you sip? It's like any tea. How long do you sip it? Da, 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 da. So I like better my pre-dosed, with everything in it, and you can take it. Yeah.
Makes sense. So one question that I'm sure a lot of people have is, are psychedelics like psilocybin safe?
Yeah, so that's very interesting because all the studies that have been made for decades and the data that we have for actually hundreds of years show it is really safe. Unfortunately, you've had decades of propaganda showing that, oh my god, if you take psychedelics and look at the sun, you're gonna get blind. I mean, like you had the worst stories of disinformation. That was disinformation. And what's happening today is that because we reached such a wall with mental health, especially for our veterans, first responders, there was almost no choice to take back psychedelics from the myth balls, because psychedelics were actually already prescribed in the 50s and 60s. It's just that after that Nixon put a ban on everything that was slightly psychoactive. So it is very difficult because now you have to work with people's stigma and misconception of what psychedelics really are. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, certainly when I just think about the various stories I've heard or various people's comments about things, it runs the whole gamut. So certainly I know that there's a lot of information. It's just a question of what's true and what's not. And I think sometimes that's really where the challenge comes in. So how would you compare like psilocybin with THC, right? The component of cannabis that gives people a high. Do you know what the similarities or differences are there?
Well, what I know is that all of them, whether it's THC, whether it's the other, have this ability to work on the way your neural pathway works. And when it comes to psilocybin, it really acts on your serotonin receptors. And that's why it's so good for people who have depression, actually. But what it does is that instead of just managing the symptoms, like most prescribed drugs we have today, actually I should say all prescribed drugs we have today, if they actually rewire your brain. So you have people who might be microdosing for a year or two and then they just stop and they don't have issues anymore. When it comes to THC, it acts on different receptors. I'm not super keen personally on THC just because I found that personally it was really increasing my anxiety, and it really make me want to eat a lot, which is not necessarily what I'm looking for. But I know people who have been microdosing THC with success. So I think it's very important for people to find their substance, to find their regimen. What I did with my book and what I do with the microdose diet is to give people a baseline, for a safe baseline, guidelines for them to try, and then after they might decide, you know what, I love it, or maybe I need to tweak it a little bit, or maybe it's not for me. And I think that's important for people to realize the ultimate choice is for them to make. It's not for someone to tell them. And I think we have forgotten that after decades of a very, very strong medical system that used to tell us what to do.
Yeah, well, the other part of it, like you said, is I mean, people react to different things different ways. I see these pharmaceutical ads, and I mean, they list at the very end all the possible complications, and I'm thinking to myself, if the complications are 10 times worse than the condition you're
Exactly.
trying to cure, um, but I got to assume what they mean is it's like a tenth or a hundredth of a percent or whatever. So
Yeah.
it's a really, really rare. I would assume. Otherwise, I don't know why you would take the risk.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but nonetheless, I think it's totally true. In fact, I saw a documentary made. I think it's called Bigger, Stronger, Faster, something like that, and it was actually made about steroids. And then what's fascinating about it is it was the guy who made it is one of three brothers. I think it's three brothers, and they were all power lifters, and they were all steroid users. And the parents were sort of in denial that they were steroid users. So the younger brother decides he wants to do this documentary. So he does the documentary on the thing, and at one point they're talking to a doctor in the middle of it, and he says to him, what's the truth? He said, you hear from one person, oh, you take steroids, it's
Yeah.
going to kill you. You'd hear talk to somebody else, it's the best thing you could have ever done. I got
Yeah.
bigger, stronger, I won all these awards. The guy says, look, I don't care whether it's Advil or tea leaves or whatever it is, anything you put in your body, there's going to be some reaction, and people are going to react differently. So some
Exactly.
people are going to tolerate it better than others, some people aren't. And so you have to sort of make those calculated decisions for yourself, and then based on the results that you're getting, decide what makes sense and what doesn't. So I think that that's just common sense.
And
um
Brett, we're never twice the same person. So something that might work for me 6 months ago is not working today. So you also need to understand that you have to constantly first have an intention. Why are you doing what you're doing? I think very often we pop stuff without even really thinking, but we know the mind has such a powerful impact on our health. So I take my microdose and I have an intention every time. So I'm not just taking it mindlessly. And I think we could do that for anything we take. That can be my tea or my glass of water. Technically, I should take it. I should have an intention for everything. I just have it for microdosing. And that's something that's very important. So it's about being present enough as well in your body to know what is a state. Most of us, we don't know what is our optimal state. So we live with, bloated belly, bad digestion, like all this stuff that we could actually heal, but we never really pay attention, and our baseline is not really accurate. So it's just like, oh, today I have a fat day, but you never think, okay, what did I eat yesterday? What did I do yesterday? What do I feel so sloppy today? And I think that's really is that we're not present. And the microdosing is at the same time it's the medicine, because it helps you also to be more present. So that's really helpful to be mindful in your decision.
yeah, I mean, awareness and recognizing cause and effect matter a lot. And I love the point that you brought up about the fact that, look, we, even as ourselves, go through evolutionary phases. And there are times in our lives where different things we'd react to differently anyway, because our mental state's different, our expectations are different, the pressures we have in our life are different. So there's going to be different reactions we have to different things based on where we are. I mean, I'll tell you a funny story that's unrelated to this, but I was at my wife and I were had the kids, and we were at a carnival years back. We were already old enough; they were still little kids. So, oh, let's go on the tilt-a-whirl. So we go on the tilt-a-whirl with them, and the ride ends, and it's just spinning you and all this other stuff. I'm not feeling great, but I'm okay. My wife's feeling the same way. The kids are like, "Yeah, let's do it again." So we think, okay, whatever, we'll do it again. I'm not even kidding. After I got off the second time, it took me a full 24 hours to get my equilibrium back. I was dizzy the entire day
Yeah.
because I was older. Your ear canal changes and all these other things, and so your reaction even to motion is different through time than it is when you're a kid, where you're like a rubber band and you can just bounce
Yes.
back from anything and you don't even notice it. So, yeah, I think it's a really valid point. So, what about psilocybin versus the pharmaceuticals, right? So there are a lot of prescription drugs. We hinted at this a little bit that are designed for various health effects. So what's your take on the differences there, or pros and cons?
Yeah, so the thing with prescribed drugs, I think they're very helpful for some people at some point in their time. So when I was a teenager, my brother passed away in an accident. My
I'm sorry to
mother,
hear that.
thank you, my mother got prescribed antidepressant because she needed something to get her out of the hole, which I think was the right move from the doctor. The challenge is when this 6 months prescription become a 25 years prescription, and so it's I don't want to throw the baby with the bathwater, because it's not true to say, oh, all prescription drugs are evil. It's not true. I just find that sometimes there are natural solutions where we can knock on that door first, and second, it's also a question of how long, or what is the dosage. But I'm just looking sometimes at these prescription drugs as a crutch. We're never addressing the real problem. So you're just managing the symptoms and you're never really healing. So I have plenty of people around me. I work with clients, and 20 years, 15 years, 25 years, if not more, on anti-anxiety, antidepressant. And now you're seeing more studies actually showing, especially for women, the link between long-term use of this type of prescribed drugs and dementia. And
Okay.
dementia and Alzheimer, actually. And so obviously, well, that's not nothing, like it's not
Yeah.
just and
Yeah.
and that's a bit the side effect you were mentioning, is that if you take it for 6 months, it is fine for most people. Of course, some people can, but it is fine. But if you take it for 25, maybe it is not. And that's why I like microdosing psilocybin, because, as I said, it's safe, but it also works on the root cause. And what I really like to do while I microdose is to continue my other practices. So I love to journal. I think it really helped me with processing, what's happening. I love tapping meditation. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but it really helps, to break down the signal that's coming between your brain and your body. So I'm not looking at microdosing as the silver bullet. It's not true. There is no silver bullet, but as one of the tools in the toolkit, it's a very powerful tool. It needs to be used with intention, strategically, also the quality of the product. Very often I have people telling me it doesn't work for me, and when I ask, okay, where did you buy it? How much are you taking? How often are you taking? People are doing absolutely like madness with that. And then they're like, well, it's not working for me. I'm like, okay, well, if you're having low quality products that you're taking in great quantity too often, no, it's not going to work for you. So you need to be smart. You need to be smart, like for everything.
Yeah, so you talked a lot about sort of the plan and the control and all this. So I'm assuming that this is all sort of baked into the microdose diet. What exactly is the microdose diet as opposed to just microdosing, and what are its benefits?
Yeah, so the diet is really a 90-day plan, and it's I would say, a transformational point. The goal is really to bring you from point A to point B. So for these 12 weeks, you're really going to go through different type of exercise, work with different tools. One is microdosing. One, as I said, is going to be some exercise regarding, journaling, tapping meditation, visualization. And the goal is really to understand, okay, what is your intention, what is your goal, and what are all the blocks you're having to that. So maybe you're afraid of change, maybe you're afraid of being visible, which is not safe. We all have so many limiting beliefs. And the people who are listening today, whether they're entrepreneur or executive, I'm sure they have their eyes on the next promotion or the next growth in their company. And very often they might have difficulties reaching their goals, or maybe they reach it and then they blow it. I did that a lot in my career. And it's because your nervous system, your brain is not aligned with that goal, with that new identity. So the goal is really to upgrade your identity in 90 days. And when I say upgrade, you're not going to go from where you are to the Dalai Lama, let's be honest. You're going to the next level, So that's really the goal of a microdose diet. It's really personal development.
And I think that's the way every journey goes anyway, right? I mean, we can't compare ourselves to anybody else in any, field of what we're trying to do. If we're looking at progress and growth, we have to compare ourselves to our own baseline, figure out where we are, where we want to go, and just try to make those incremental changes, because incremental changes over a period of time, if it's sustained, leads to a massive difference. And so I think that's really powerful. So does microdosing help improve physical and mental well-being? And if so, like, are there more details, or how is there anything more you can share with us about that?
Yeah. So you can see three types of benefits, with microdosing. Again, mindful microdosing. The first one is really about your mental health. So I spoke about stress, anxiety, depression, PTSD. So that will really help you alleviate, the symptoms of these different challenges. So think about it as a mood boost, really. So that is why I started microdosing. It is a very pleasant experience to actually not necessarily always have, this dark cloud above your head. And one day you're like, oh my God, where, you were mentioning being hyper vigilant, and jumping at every sound, and you're like, oh my God, I was not anxious for that meeting, or I didn't jump when someone dropped a pin on the floor. What's happening, So that is really great. The second bucket, which might also be of interest to people who are listening, is really about performance. And you mentioned I used to be a venture capitalist, so in Silicon Valley, the tech entrepreneurs, also the VCs, are very interesting in microdosing psychedelics for the performance, because what's happening is that you get tremendous focus, and you can really do, I would say, in 3 hours what you might be doing in 6, because you are like laser focus. But what I love as well, and I mentioned it with Steve Jobs and acid, is the creativity. You really get a creativity boost. So maybe before you were only seeing option 1 and option 2, and now you're like, oh, option 3, option 4, And so you have more of an ability to connect dots, but also to, look for areas where people might not be already. So that, I would say, of course, from a career perspective, very, very helpful. It is obviously helpful, problem solving is helpful in your day-to-day life, of course, but I would say from a career perspective, that is massive. And the third thing is more about connection, and I would say connection with yourself and connection with others. It really helps with increasing your compassion. And if you look at yourself, if you are whether you're a leader or in a team, it's going to be way easier to work with others. And that, I think, is something we don't speak about enough, because that brings a lot of value. So,
All right, and with that, it's just about time to wrap things up. I want to thank you again, Peggy, so much for sharing all of your insights and great tips with us. Visit PeggyVanDePlassche.com for free resources, her book, her online course, her podcast, coaching, and more. Thanks for tuning in. And as always, remember, no matter what you want from your business and your life, don't compromise, optimize.